this is such a fascinating field for me to understand the ethics of bioengineering and tissue culture and all of these things. And I read through your book as well as your partner Yonat Zer's PhD thesis and so on. Why this field? Why did you get in this field?
So the origin was basically me studying product design in the 90s, and coming from a very ecological perspective. I grew up in a farm. I was always interested in life. I actually majored in biology in high school, but thought that design, or actually I didn't even want to be a designer, I must say. I wanted to be an artist, but I thought that I should be practical about my life. So I studied design and product design, and I tried to, since the very beginning, try to combine biology and design. I believed then, which I don't really believe now, but that might, as a conversation progresses, we might get to there, that if we move our culture from a culture of manufacturing to a culture of growing, if we start to work with living biological systems in order to make the made world around us, it might change kind of our relationship to the made environment, also change our relationship to the concept that we know as nature. So the idea was that we can start to design living biological products. I realized that I'm much more interested by the questions that this prospect raises rather than the solutions that it might offer. So I decided to continue my exploration as an artist because, especially at the time, that was, again, before speculative design became something that I thought that art is a really good vehicle to explore open-ended questions and probe into the ethical issues rather than provide solutions or think about the ways in which this knowledge can be employed in a utilitarian way. I think the strength of art, and I still believe so, is the fact that it's not utilitarian, that it really is about creating those ambiguous situations where people are confronted by that, are challenged, and so their perceptions around the world are being challenged, and art does a really good job at that in many cases. So I decided to become an artist. I decided to look at one technology in particular at the time, and that was tissue engineering. And again, going back to the idea of the mouse with Iron speck and how striking that image was. And I wanted to explore this technology further. One of the things is the fact that we're using this one term, life, to describe such a wide range of phenomena. I'm not trying to be prescriptive or directive in the way I present my work as art, because the whole idea is to bring people into a situation where they have to kind of, they should realize that their long-held beliefs are somehow incompatible with what they're being confronted with, but it's not up to me as an artist to tell them how to think about it. They have to then figure it out. But here's a great example. Yeah, so this is how really things started for me and Yonat. Is the very first lab that we worked in was an eye research institute. And the scientist, the chief scientist, was trying to develop artificial corneas. So he was developing different types of, he was a chemist, so he was trying to develop different types of materials to see if they are compatible with the eye, and that he can make those artificial corneas from. And in order to do so, we had to grow cells. And in this case, there were cells that were taken from eyes of rabbits. Yeah, so this layer of skin that kind of covers your eye. So he needed to source those cells from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the lab where we worked in, once a week they would get a cardboard box full of half rabbits' heads. Yeah. We were told the rabbits were slaughtered in the morning for food. So, people eat rabbits. So obviously they don't eat the heads. So the heads were then sent to a brain research institute. There they would cut the heads in half, take the brains out. And our lab, the Eye Research Institute, will only get those cardboard boxes with those half rabbits' heads around lunchtime. They would then take their eyes out and put them in antibiotic solution. And only more than 24 hours after the animal was dead, we learned how to isolate living viable cells out of those rabbits' eyes. And that put us in a really strange situation, because what we were confronted with when we saw the cardboard box was with pieces of dead meat. You can't be more dead than being a half head with no brains, kind of sitting in a cardboard box. But 24 hours later, you could get living cells out of it. And we then did for quite a few of other experiments throughout our careers where we were able to actually isolate viable cells that were living from animals that were dead for up to 2 weeks. And I know that there were some experiments that even pushed that further. So the idea of life becomes quite an interesting one, because we know that the rabbits are dead, but the cells are alive. But the life of the cells was somewhat different than the life of the rabbit. Yeah, and there's many different ways to think about it. But we decided to talk about it in the terms of the semi-living. Yeah, so that there's different gradients of life, and there's like life is not an on-off switch. There's no, we talk about life and death as if they are very deterministic and very clear and obvious, but that's not really the case. It's a much more, as you said, like a much more nuanced kind of notion. I believe that Western medicine is one of the best forms of medicine that humans invented. It's problematic. There's some issues around it that, but it is evidence-based. I think one of the things that Western science does really well is isolating the subject of your investigation from the rest of its context. So a lot of what we do in Western science and Western medicine is kind of a form of decontextualized thinking in order to be able to focus on the problem at hand without understanding the larger context in which those problems occur or those solutions are trying to solve. So there are some shortfalls, but I think that still it's the best system that humans came up with to date. There's a growing anti-intellectualism happening in the world. Universities are shutting down departments that are engaging in critical thinking. There's a perception that some areas of the humanities are not important anymore. There's the world is becoming more and more. I don't know what's your background, but so hopefully I won't offend you. But the world seems to be driven now by managers and engineers that are fulfilling a really important function in society. But if that's the only way of thinking about how we deal with the world, I think humanities are not going to go anywhere good, in a sense. So we need to allow for a more intellectual, more critical way of engaging. We need to allow for university departments to actually be there in order to investigate the problems that are can be caused by some of the solutions that are being offered by the managers and the engineers. Yeah, so we need to find a balance.